Today, we're going to be talking about a book by Stephen King about a small town in Maine with a supernatural secret. Granted, that could be about 24 different Stephen King books, but the one we're talking about today is the original. That's right. We are talking about Salem's Lot. Hello, book people. My name is P.T. Hylton. I am the author of the Deadlock trilogy and other books. Today, I wanted to talk about Salem's Lot. It is going to be October in just a couple days as I'm recording this. Spooky season is upon us, as they say. And also, HBO Max is going to be releasing a new adaptation of Salem's Lot in just a couple days. So with that in mind, I wanted to revisit this book, which I haven't read, probably a decade or so, I would venture to guess. So I went ahead and pulled out my dusty old first edition brag of Salem's Lot to see what I thought of it. So if you haven't read the book, I'll just give you a quick rundown of the premise. Ben Mears is a fiction writer who's had some critical success with a couple of his novels, and they've been minor hits. And he is now working on his next book, and he's going to write it about a kind of haunted house experience he had when he was a kid growing up in this small town called Jerusalem's Lot, or Salem's Lot, or even The Lot, as a lot of the locals call it. So he moves back to this town temporarily. But he is not the only one who has come to the town. Two mysterious businessmen have also moved to the town, and they bring with them a host of evil that's about to befall this town. So just a few things that really struck me about this book. The first thing is that it is really quintessential Stephen King. You know, it was his second published novel, and there's so many tropes here that he's going to return to again and again throughout his career. Of course, we've got the small town horror aspect, and what Stephen King does so well in so many books, from, you know, It to Needful Things to so many others, is you have this town of people where the town is maybe economically downtrodden a little bit. They don't have a lot of opportunities, but he also doesn't shy away from the fact that in this type of small town, a lot of times there's a lot of closed-minded people, a lot of nasty people, but also some very, you know, accepting and loving people who embrace our heroes. And one of Stephen King's favorite things to do that he does very well here, and again later in books, is have these chapters where we're just seeing multiple perspectives of different people in the town. And one of my favorite things about Stephen King is he can just introduce a character, and within a page or even half a page sometimes, you feel like you know this character, you know their flaws, you know part of what makes them tick. And when you get one of those sections, you're like, who's this person? I don't care about this person. This isn't, get back to our main characters. But, you know, a couple pages in, you're like, this is an interesting character. And he does that so well, and he just does it again and again. And you know, even though he returns to it throughout his career, I think he does it just as well in this first attempt as he does in, you know, the more recent books where he's kind of taken the same approach. Hey folks, editing PT here. So something weird happened with my audio in this section. I'm not sure what it was, but basically I had to cut out the section where I was talking about a couple of the other tropes that King uses a lot. One being a younger male protagonist who befriends an older male within the town, and the older man is one of the only people who believes what's going on about the supernatural, and they kind of work together and talk about what this means for their worldview and things like that. The other one was a child who is wise beyond his years and is braver in the face of all this terrible stuff than most of the adults. And then I also mentioned how, because of all these tropes, this would be a really good first Stephen King novel for people, because whether you like, you know, if you're more into the small town horror thing, you can go into It or Needful Things, where if you like the child who's wise beyond their years, you might be able to jump into Talisman or Fairy Tale. And there's quite a few of those opportunities. So yeah, that was the part that we missed. Let's go back to other PT. Another thing that I really like about Salem's Lot is the way that it deals with the villains, which I guess minor spoiler, but I think if you know anything about Salem's Lot, you know this, and probably if you read the back copy on the modern versions, I would imagine it says this on it. But I guess if you don't want to know anything about it, don't listen to this. But it's a book about vampires, and the way that this deals with vampires is just different and interesting. And I'm surprised for a book that's, you know, gosh, over 50 years old now. Is that right? It was in the 70s. Hold on, I got to do some math. 1975. So next year, we can look forward to the 50th anniversary of this bad boy. But for a book that is nearly 50 years old, I'm surprised that more people haven't tried to take this approach to vampires, which, I think we're familiar with kind of the vampire as the seductor, the kind of Byron-esque, misunderstood anti-hero, mysterious guy, and everything from Anne Rice to, the Buffyverse certainly touches on that quite a bit. And then we've also seen examples of a vampire as kind of just a feral killing machine, almost, part werewolf almost in their ferocity. 30 Days of Night comes to mind, as well as my book series, The Vampire World, starting with The Savage Earth. We took that approach to vampires. But the way vampires are treated in this is almost like a plague, like the way that it just comes in and ravages the town from the inside out and just tears it apart in a very short period of time is breathtaking and scary, and just a really interesting approach to vampires. And the way it kind of takes the things that are cool about like a zombie movie, where it's like, oh no, my friend has been turned and now I have to kill them. You've got that aspect, but your friend isn't just a mindless, machine trying to eat brains. Your friend still knows everything that they knew about you, and that secret you confided in them about, they're going to use it against you now, and they're going to try to manipulate you in every way possible. And it's really cool, really effective, really well done here. The last thing I want to talk about this book was I was surprised by how personally moving it was to me. I live in a small town in the Appalachian Mountains in Tennessee in the United States. And I also ride bikes a lot. I ride my bicycle, not motorcycle. I'm not that cool. I ride my bicycle a lot, and I go on a little bit of a bike packing trip or bike tour every year. Last year, I went with some friends through Kentucky, small towns in Kentucky. The year before that, it was Missouri. And so I've gone through a lot of these small towns, and there's always this sense of like desolation to them, where you wonder, boy, this town, I wonder what it used to be in the heyday, and there's just empty buildings and things like that. And the vampires are almost an analogy for that in this book, where you could take them as representing everything from, economic hardship to the opioid crisis to anything else that's affected smaller communities, and just the way that something that in a larger city might be able to be contained in this small town is just absolutely devastating. And the timing is unfortunate and sad. Like, we just had a hurricane go through here, and just in the past few days, the devastation that has been wrecked on some of the towns around me. I was very lucky, and me and my family were safe. But boy, the videos and images I'm seeing of people trapped on the roof of a hospital as the waters rise, and they're screaming for help, and there's no one to help them. To interstates and highways, they're just completely flooded or even completely wiped out. There's quite a few towns around me where people are just trapped in the town because all the roads in or out of the town have been either closed or flooded, or in some cases completely wiped out. So I read this book at a very interesting time, in that the devastation that's happening in Salem's Lot, I see that reflected in the real world. And I think that is one of the cool things about fiction, is that it takes this familiar and even difficult to grasp concept of all this devastation and puts it into a fictional terms where it's a little easier perhaps to digest and to think about it and to see things from a different and new angle. So anyway, my heart goes out to all the people who've been affected more than I have by the hurricanes. And I didn't mean for this to take such a somber note, but that's one of the things that I really like about small town horror and Stephen King's take on it in particular, is that it's not surface level. It's not like this just Hollywood view of a small town. It's getting deep into the lives of these people while being very realistic about the things they're facing, and the darkness that's within a lot of the people, but also the hope that's within them. So I hope that if you do read this, you can walk away with some of the hope like I did, while also experiencing a really unique and interesting vampire story, and also the second novel by one of our great novelists. So that is Salem's Lot. I would love to hear what you think about it, and I'm really curious to see the movie coming up in a couple days here, and maybe, I don't know, maybe I'll do a short or something reacting to what I thought of that. Let me know what you thought of the book or the movie, if and when you watch it, down in the comments, and until next time, keep turning pages.